Welcome to the March 13th Select Board meeting. I'm going to ask everyone to rise, and we'd like to do a pledge of allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to call for a roll call vote, please.
Frank West here.
Lilia Maselli here.
Greg Bendel is here.
And Gary DePalma is here. At this time, there are no treasury warrants, no minutes. We'll go right to the appointment, which is the interview of town manager, Scott Galvin and Eric Slagle.
Great. Mr. Chair, once
Introduce
again,
yourself
John
again.
Petrin, Community Paradigm, here with Julie Jacobson. So we've been handling the search, for the town, for your next town manager position. And again, we worked with the screening committee, and as we said last night, it was an excellent experience for us to work with your screening committee. We had 17 candidates apply for the position. They interviewed 7 in the screening rounds, of which 4 are being recommended to the board for your interview. And so all 4 candidates have the same standing when we come in. These aren't ranked in any order. And so we had 2 candidates last night, gave you halftime over the night. We're here for the second 2 today, and my understanding is the board will be meeting on Monday for its deliberation and for its appointment on Monday night. So that's been the process to date. So we start with Scott Galvin, will be your candidate to start with this evening, and we're ready to go if the board's ready.
We're ready to go. Thank you.
Okay, and as last night, we'll conduct with asking the questions from our table here, but certainly open to, any follow-up questions, or like you did last night with the board, asking some questions at the end of the formal questions, as you go through. So we'll follow the same process.
Thank you.
Scott Galvin is first candidate for the
Good evening.
Watch the wires.
Yes, watch the
Yeah,
wires.
Gary DePalma.
Hi, nice to meet you. Greg Bendel.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Scott. Nice to see you. Nice to see you.
Lilia Maselli, good to meet you.
Frank West.
Should I take my position as candidates come back over here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Stand like a ketchup.
We'll include that in the bill on the saving the
You were
liability
blocking
last
guard
night.
in high school?
Yeah, the size finally came in handy on that one.
We had someone trip last night, that's why we're,
Yeah.
Just a little joke on this side. Okay, so at this point, we'll begin the interview with Mr. Galvin. So Scott will be asking the questions from over here. The board will be asking follow-up questions as they see fit, but you'll be addressing the board, as you go through
Thank you.
their interview process. So first of all, we want to congratulate you on being a finalist here in Wilmington, and certainly thank you, for your application to the town. We understand we do that with all the candidates. This is an interesting process when you open in a public setting, of this nature. But what we'd like to do is start off, give you the opportunity to give yourself, your introduction of yourself and your interest here in the town of Wilmington.
Sure, thank you, John. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm really appreciative to be one of the finalists selected for the position. And before I start, I do want to recognize Lou. And when I first became mayor in the city of Woburn, we had a retirement. Our veterans agent was retired, had passed away, unfortunately, and we had nobody to give the benefits out. I didn't know what to do. I picked up the phone, I called Wilmington, Lou stepped right up. So you've got a great guy here who's been filling in, and he really cares about the veterans.
Temporary.
Yeah, temporary, but you did a great job, and I do want to thank you, Lou. I haven't seen you since then, but I my veterans agents talk very highly of you, so I want to thank you.
Thank you.
But I grew up in the city of Woburn, lived in Woburn all my life. Married, my wife Eileen's a registered nurse. We have 4 children. My youngest just had her 24th birthday yesterday, so my 4 children are out of the house. We're empty nesters. As I said, I grew up in Woburn. Went to school in the Woburn Public School System, graduated from Providence College with a business degree in management. I went on to law school at New England School of Law, got my JD, began practicing on my own, set up my own practice in the city and did very well. At the same time, when I was 28, I ran for city council. I was elected to serve as an alderman, served for 16 years, learned the city government from the bottom up. It was a great experience in the legislative side. I then decided, after 16 years, it was time to become mayor. It was something I always wanted to do. I ran for mayor, and there were 4 other candidates which challenged the incumbent. It ended up being me and the incumbent, and I won the race. I served as mayor for 16 years, 14 years, sorry, served as mayor for 14 years. Longest-serving mayor in the city of Woburn, and, unfortunately, I lost my last race, and I have this municipal in my blood. It's something I really want to do. Saw the opportunity in Wilmington, very familiar with your town, and it's very well-run, and I thought it'd be a great opportunity to use my skills, my experience to help the town move forward.
So Scott, how would you work with the board in understanding the vision of the board for the town? And what do you see as your role in that process, as well as setting a path for implementation?
Right. So, from my perspective, it's very important to have a strong working relationship with each and every one of you individually. So my goal would be to, if I was selected, to meet with each of you individually and find out what your goals are, what's important to you, and what you want to see done moving forward. And also then, from my perspective, meet you as a whole and find out what the board's collective goals and plans are for the city. And then we would work in that direction. I would see my role as advising the board, keeping you informed on what's going on. I think it's very important to have communication on a regular basis. The last thing I think the board wants to do is get blindsided with an issue in the town. So that's how I would see the operation going.
So the board's in consensus that leadership skills are critical in this hire. What skills and approach will you bring to the table to address this?
So I have very strong leadership skills, I think, and I've demonstrated that over my 14 years as mayor, from strong financial, fiscal responsibility. That's one of the things I take the greatest amount of pride in, but also just a leadership and working with my department heads, kind of allowing them to do what they need to do to get work done. And I know in Wilmington, you're very proud of your department heads, and you should be, just as I am of the department heads in my city and the work that they were able to accomplish. But, leadership is very important. You've got to communicate and move forward. But I do strongly feel that what my experience that I bring to the table, I have, like I said, experience, strong fiscal experience, as far as collective bargaining, that's a strong point of mine as well. Over my time as mayor, worked on over 20 collective bargaining agreements, and the goal is always to be fair. The goal is to be fair to the employees and to be fair to the taxpayers. Sometimes, as many of you know, that they don't always go smoothly. Sometimes they can be more contentious, but at the end of the day, the goal is to come up with an agreement that's fair to the employees, the taxpayer, and really, as they say, that the sign of a good deal is that when neither party is totally happy.
So coming into this position, let's talk about your understanding of this position, and what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, that you see in this position here today in Wilmington?
When you look at Wilmington's information that's provided online, I think the town has done a very good job positioning itself to continue moving forward. I look at your free cash balances, which are incredibly strong. Your reserves are strong, and your budgeting is very conservative. I know you turn back, at the end of the year, you'll be turning back money from unspent appropriations, which is, something that I think is indicative of a well-run town or city when they're looking at their expenses on a regular basis. I think that, like we did in Woburn, we invested in things that made Woburn a good place, a great place to work, raise a family, and have a business start in that community. And I look at Wilmington in the same light. The investments that you've made, you're continuing to invest in recreation, you're investing in your education, your schools, your public safety, and I see the construction projects that you have going, and I think, I love construction projects. In the city of Woburn, during my time as mayor, 2 new schools were built. We built a new library. We just recently completed a fire station. And we built a number of different parks. So I think that my experience there, and the fact that you're doing those things, I'd be really interested in digging into those, and being the point person for those, and keeping the selectmen, keeping your board up to speed on what's happening, any issues that are going on during the construction.
We all know schools are important, in a community, and what's a good relationship, what's a proper relationship between general government and schools look like in a town of this type?
Look, that's, having a strong educational system is really the lifeline, it's the lifeblood of a community. And I know Wilmington's committed to their schools, and you see it in your current, the current work you're doing on your feasibility study to build a new elementary school, a combined elementary school with the Wildwood, the North and the Woburn schools. And I think the work that's going on is very important as your town moves forward. I think that again, my experience over the past 14 years in the city of Woburn, I worked with 2 different superintendents, and I'd urge you to reach out to them. Mark Dunham was the first superintendent, and Matt Crowley now. The working relationship between the town manager or the mayor and the superintendent it's imperative. It's imperative to have a strong school system, and you have to be committed to the schools. And during my time as mayor in the city of Woburn, annual budget increase were well in excess of 4%, 4% annually. Additional capital outlays generally ran in the area of $500,000 to $600,000 a year, and we were always well above state net school spending, the minimum net school spending figure. So I think it's very important. And the role of the mayor is to really listen to the school committee, listen to the superintendent. You can't give them everything they want. I mean, sometimes their requests start higher, and you got to bring them down to something that fits within your budget. But again, as I say, working through that process, we were always able to make strong commitments to our school department.
Let's talk about the finance side a little bit, and you've addressed it, a little bit, but we want to dig in a little deeper as to your role, in the financial planning, in your past position, as a mayor, and your financial management strategies for ensuring organizational sustainability. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so it starts with planning, and you can't, it's really a long-term process. Implementing best practices, which we have done, which we have really stressed since I became mayor. It's important, starting backwards, we are a AAA-rated community, and we weren't always a AAA-rated community. Again, that's something that was important to me and my financial team, and we knew we had to do certain things to get there. We had to do the best practices, like 5-year capital plan, which we had done on a regular basis, updated on a regular basis. 5-year forecast, where you're forecasting your revenues, you're forecasting your expenses, and you want to keep on top of them. That's something that when you do them, you want to see how you ended up doing with your forecast. So it's always a rolling process. And I think that's one of the most important things that we did is the forecasting and keeping on top of that on a regular basis. We also implemented a city staff program where we meet with the 3 biggest departments, being Public Works, Police, and Fire, go over their revenues, go over some of the statistics that happen, just to keep on top of where they are during the course of the year. And in addition to the big departments, we also do a quarterly review of our budget to make sure we're not over on our expenditures, to make sure our revenues are where we thought they should be. And as I say, it did pay off for us. As we became a AAA community, we increased our reserves by over 50% since when I first became mayor. And that's not something that you can do by yourself. You have to do that as a team, and it starts with a strong financial team. And I met with my financial team on a weekly basis. The financial team consists of the auditor, the treasurer, the assessor, and we also met with the superintendent from the school side, just to keep on track. But it's important, and when I look at a town like Wilmington, I look at some of the things you're doing, and particularly when you're heading out, you've got a number of big projects that I think would benefit from a AAA bond rating, and really, like I said, I look at where you are now, look at your reserves, look at some of the budgeting process that you're doing. For instance, you're putting money towards your OPEB. You put $1 million towards OPEB. You're putting $1 million every year to your stabilization fund and $1.5 million to your retirement because you're a little bit behind on your funding. But those steps that you're taking would really ring, I think they'd have a real positive ring to the ratings community. And you have to go out to Standard & Poor's. You have to go out to them and sell them why you deserve a AAA. They're not, they might not give it to you. And what we did in 2018, we actually rented a trolley and put our financial team together, brought them in a room just like this, and made a presentation about the positives that we're doing in the city of Woburn. Brought them out to some of the sites that our construction projects were out, brought them out to some of the areas that we thought had potential development that would continue to make Woburn a better place. And I think Wilmington is primed not only for an upgrade in your bond, but also just what you're doing is really exciting for the future of the residents.
Your role in the budget process in the city, is it going to be different from your role that you see as a town manager in a town meeting format?
No, I think it's, I really don't think it's much of a difference. And I think the town form is really the purest form of democracy. But really, when the mayor starts the budget process, we'd start the budget process late December, early January, and really I'd meet with every department head with my financial team. We'd go over their budget, go over what type of budget they're looking for, and then we'd trim it down or give them what they need depending on where the overall budget started. But not similar to your finance committee. When you finish the budget, then you meet with them on a regular basis. They make recommendations. We would then go down to the city council, which is the legislative body, and present them each department's budget, very similar to what you do with the finance committee, and they'd make recommendations back, whether they'd approve the budget or make cuts. And then at that point, we'd send it back to the full council, and there'd be a public hearing, and it's nowhere near as, it's for the residents to come down and comment, and then the city council makes the final decision. It's nowhere near the town meeting input, but it does follow along the same line. So I think the transition would be pretty seamless from my perspective.
Well, follow up on one point. So let's talk about financial forecasting and financial policy, since we're still talking the budget side of things. How do you handle, the forecasting, of the future, relative to finances, and what's the role of financial policies?
So the financial policies, again, was something that we incorporated when I became mayor, and they're important for a number of reasons. They just, set where your reserves should be, set when you should use your reserves, when you shouldn't use your reserves, what type of debt that, you're comfortable incurring and the like. So the financial policies are very important from that perspective to give you a guideline on how you should be operating. And with regard to forecasting of the revenues, John, every year we look at where we are and kind of assign what we would think would be the increase that would be needed for each level of government.
As you're aware, the finance director and the assistant town manager is leaving the town of Wilmington for other opportunities in each case. How do you rebuild the team? Those are two important people, especially on the finance side of things.
Right.
So how do you rebuild that team, and what approach do you take?
Well, I think the first thing is it's very important as far as the finance director that you get the right person in with the experience. And I think, as we all know, it's not as easy to fill those shoes as it was at one time. There's really, there's not as many people going into municipal professions as they used to be, which is unfortunate, because it can be a very gratifying career, but, I think the appointment is the selectman's appointment for finance. And it's a very important one, and I think that once you have appointed that person, then I would like to meet with them and kind of talk about their philosophies, my philosophies, make sure we're on the same page, and the communication is a constant flow. And again, as I said, I'd like to get to the point where we're putting together a financial team that meets on a regular basis and has open flow of dialogue. With regard to the assistant, again, I'd sit down and talk with each and every one of you individually and then collectively to find out what you're looking for in an assistant. And then we'd, move from there, but that's an important position.
John? Just a little follow-up on financing. With finances becoming very tight, no matter what city or town that you're in, how important do you feel it is to, I call it chasing grants? Do you feel that you should have someone, even if it's on a part-time basis, that's working for you, that is locating these grants, finding out where these grants are, finding out if the town is allowed to apply for them, qualifies to apply?
I think that's very helpful. When I was in Woburn, a lot of the department heads would, like in your town, I'm sure there's a lot of very motivated department heads who identify the grants, and sometimes you'll use, one of the consultants to help you get that grant. But you're absolutely right, and there's also the Mass Federal Funds Partnership, which I don't know which you're familiar with, but that's was set up by Lou. You must be attending the meetings. They're on a monthly meeting, but they identify the funds that are available on the federal level under the Inflation Reduction Act and other sources of funds. So it is important, Mr. Chairman, that you do aggressively go after them, particularly, as you said, with finances being tight and every dollar that you can bring in reduces the obligation on your taxpayer. So I do think, it's definitely worth pursuing or looking into if the town's
Thank you.
looking to do that.
You addressed the fact that you had several capital projects in Woburn, schools, fire station, and so on. How do you build, how do you build a strategy relative to, the capital projects and then financing and implementing those projects? It's always so difficult to do. So how do you build that strategy?
Yeah, so again, it is part of the 5-year projection, and some of these bigger capital projects, have to fit into that, whether it's through, obviously through, in Woburn's case, it'd be through bonding, but sometimes if it doesn't fit in and if you have a bigger project, then you have to talk about debt exclusion or debt override, and those are things that have to, you need real public support for them. And, Woburn had a debt exclusion for its high school, which was built back in 2008. We haven't had one since, and, we've been able to, been able to bring on 2 new elementary schools in the $30 million range, a new library for $32 million, and also just recently a new fire station for $23 million. And we've been able to fit those in within the constraints of 2.5 without doing exclusion. But you can't always do those, and if you can't, then it's really important that those projects are strongly supported by the community, and particularly when I think of the school that Wilmington's looking to build. It's a sizable investment, and again, I know that you've done a good job with your budget, being conservative, being very conservative with your local receipts and how you estimate them, and some of the appropriations you made to supplement your capital stabilization fund. But when you're talking about that, not everything can fit within the budget, and again, I think you have to look at the community to make sure they're behind these projects, and I know that in this case you've got a great project that you're looking at with a combination of the 3 elementary schools. It's just a question of with the senior center that you're building for $18 million, with the the new town hall for 37, 38 million. Those are gonna carry some heavy debt service, and you wanna make sure with your projections that they fit in.
Personnel management in HR today, what are some of the key issues that you need to be, that need to be addressed, you know, on the bigger picture in HR?
Well, it's really, it's always a constant, I think it's always a constant flow, and in Woburn, we had an HR director, which was my appointment, so, you know, we were again on a regular basis of contact. Big issues we had, of course, was health insurance. You know, there is still that issue of diversity, equity, inclusion that you have to be concerned about, and how that's gonna be addressed.
You mentioned earlier, you know, when we talked about hiring a finance director and the difficulty, you know, in hiring finance directors. So how do you maybe address some of that area, you know, of seeking, you know, our new hires in the business? And, you know, what are some ideas you might have relative to that?
As far as recruiting them,
Yes.
yeah, you know, really what, you know, it's, you do have to kind of network with some of your other mayors, town managers to see what they, you know, what they're seeing out there, but, as far as recruiting, it's generally just been advertising in the MMA and different publications to get, quality candidates in.
When you are hiring a town employee, what are some of the important qualities you're seeking in a person, generally when hiring?
You know, it's always dedication, honesty. I mean, someone who I think has, you know, is honest with me, can tell me what they feel and what's happening on a regular basis. But those are some of the qualities. And, you know, as mayor, you know, I've had, the mayor has about 10 appointments of department heads. And one of the things I am most proud of in that is that we have kind of spread it out as far as the diversity. There's, you know, and it could always be more, but 60% have been male, 40% have been female. So we do, you know, we have spread that out on that, and generally I'm happy with that it's a good policy for the city.
Complicated organizations we work in.
Yeah.
How do you encourage teamwork within that organization?
Look, teamwork is really the most important thing, and you know, you set that up. You generally, when I was mayor, we had department head meetings, which most towns and cities have. You have a department head meeting. We met on a quarterly basis, but we also set up smaller teams where we met, you know, particularly with the DPW, the city engineer, procurement, IT. We had different subgroups where we met that were more related to the different projects, and I think that teamwork came through, and you know, I am proud of the work that the department heads do. You meet on a regular basis, like on a weekly basis, but then give them the freedom to do what they do. That's what the department heads do. They do it well, and it shows in the results that we have. And I think that, you know, Wilmington has the same spirit where you have great department heads, and you have to still meet with them, build a team, build the excitement about projects you're doing, build the excitement about, you know, the budget and all that stuff. So I think the team building is really when you're meeting on a regular basis, talk to people, be honest with them, and get their input.
Sometimes we get an employee who's maybe not a team player, and needs you know, some additional assistance. How do you go about, how do you approach that, you know, with the person who is potentially not playing well in the playground?
Yeah, and you do find that there's, you know, they work in a silo. They don't like to be bothered. You find that. Luckily in Woburn, we don't have many situations like that. They do, John, as you said, they do happen. And when they do, you know, you try to bring them into different projects. You try to, you know, encourage them to be more collaborative with their employees, because when you're more collaborative and you get more things done, and there is a lot of cross-function between departments. There really is, and it's important that they take advantage of the skills that other departments have, and that's what we try to do with the ones who aren't quite as quite as the team players.
Scott, I'm going to ask you a couple questions now. Let's turn to economic development and environmental issues. So with your understanding of Wilmington's attitude toward maintaining its current character into the future, and with your experience in economic development, what suggestions would you have to improve on their approach to economic development?
Well, I think, again, looking at, when I looked at your website, you do have a strong planner and a pretty good economic development, an economic development plan. But it does all start with a master plan, and the planning is the big part of it. The master plan is a big document. It's a big undertaking. But it is important because it sets the tone, it sets the plan, the goals as far as housing, economic development, parks, open space, even your finances. So it's a big document. It's a lot of public input, a lot of meetings, and you're getting the feel from the community of what they want, what they're comfortable with, what type of development they want. It's something that you need the assistance of a consultant. I don't think there's anyone in any department in any city or town that's capable to do it themselves. But that's the starting point, I think, a good master plan. And again, there are other plans, Julie, that help in this process that we've undertaken in the city of Woburn, like the hazard mitigation plan, which gets to your point, Mr. Chairman, about grants. You have a good hazard mitigation plan that allows you to apply for grants with FEMA to help address those issues that are constant problems in the city as far as sustainability or, flooding and whatnot. So that's a good planning document. Also, the open space document, open space and recreation, and again, a strong planning document that helps you plan for, recreation. I know recreation's important in every city and town. Again, in Wilmington, it seems like you guys are on overdrive with recreation and the importance. So a good open space plan will help you get grants from the state as well.
I just want to follow up on something you had said in response to one of John's questions. You talked about bringing department heads together when you had a major project. Can you expand upon that a little? How does that help facilitate economic development?
As far as bringing them in the loop, if you have everybody on the same page, working towards the same goals that have come down from, the mayor and the city council, it helps to have them on the same page and to meet about the project, to feel good about moving it forward. That's generally what.
And just a last follow-up on that, when that group would meet, did you have opportunities, or do you see the need to have an opportunity to bring in a developer, or bring in a project promoter, or bring in an entrepreneur into the community and help guide them through the process? Did you do that?
That is as far as the bringing developers in, we had set up another subgroup, with the building inspector, planning board director, public works, engineering, to help facilitate special permits and to point them towards development, tell them some of the things that would help get to that point. And that was really successful with some of the bigger developers and even some of the smaller developers. And it is important that, you have this working relationship, a good working relationship, inside and outside City Hall. But there are times that, my door was always open. That was the policy. My door was always open. Whether it's a big developer, small developer, we have some substantial developers, substantial office holders. We have Cummings property, and they were, we like to work with them. We like to work with any developer who's going to invest money in the community and help reduce our taxes. So that's one of the things we do.
On the environmental side, based on your experience and your research into the town of Wilmington,
Right.
what do you see as some important actions and strategies the town can take for addressing environmental issues, such as you mentioned sustainability, the Olin Superfund site,
Yeah.
PFAS?
Yeah, so the Olin Superfund site is, that's moving forward, and I know that creates a lot of angst in the community. And in Woburn, we also had Superfund sites. We had over by the industrial plex. That was a long-time Superfund site, and when you go over there now, it is, really it's a transformative Superfund site, and I think it's something the federal government's very proud of what they've done in partnership with the city and with the state, and starting with Anderson Station and some of the development that you start seeing breaching out there. We also have another Superfund site where our wells G and H were, which is right along Salem Street, which is a lesser-known Superfund site, but we're working on that now with the feds, and that's something that we want to clean up and, again, get either for passive redevelopment or whatever type of redevelopment goes forward. As far as the Olin site, it's really important that you have an open communication with the EPA and tell them what you're looking to see there, whether it's nothing or whether you want to have that land put back to use, which is generally what they want, but it's your decision. It's your town, and you want to make sure that, what goes there is what the select board and what the residents want to see, and that might be nothing, open space, or that might be something that you put back on the tax rolls and gives back to the town. But that's, the importance is that you have to have the communications with the feds and meet with them regularly.
So you touched on it a little bit, but communications are obviously critical for any municipality to make sure that they're engaging with their residents and their taxpayers, as well as internal communications. So what would you do to enhance communications here, internally and externally, including the use of any technology or new communication systems that may be out there?
I mean, I would look at the outreach that you have. The first place you look at, obviously, is the website. And again, I think Wilmington has a pretty strong website. It's updated regularly. It gives a lot of information out. That's really the number one source. But again, you can supplement that with a good social media complement. But there really is no substitute. There really is no substitute for being in touch with the community from the town manager's perspective, from the mayor's perspective. And that really means starting with an open door policy, getting out in the community, whether you're meeting with Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, right up to, your businesses that are existing here right now, getting out, talking to them, finding out what's important, or giving them information about the city, but the town. But you have to be, I think you have to be in the community. It was important for me as a mayor to be out in the community, to let people know what's happening. And sometimes it's really just, talking to people, telling them what's happening. And that was always, I think, an important way to go.
Sure.
Question on the environment. This is from a resident. Olin Chemical Superfund site in Wilmington is the most important environmental issue in the town, with on and off-site contaminations polluting our groundwater and our water supply. We've lost a well up there. With potential redeveloping looming, what is your stance on the redevelopment of a Superfund site, hasting it up, trying to move forward, so to speak? Would you fight to support development because of tax dollars you would be generating, or would you fight against it to make sure that the area of development is clean and that it's moving towards a clean environment for the whole site?
Well, I think the primary goal always should be to clean it up for the good of the community, to make sure it's safe for the generations that are going to come down the road. The overall plan, again, is determined by the town, and I think that's something that again, you really need input from the residents. You need input from the residents and from this board about what you want to see there. That's the important thing, and that's done by planning. But it's paramount, for your residents that is clean. It's already impacted your water system, and you want to make sure it doesn't have any more impacts negative on the environment up there.
Thank you.
So regarding conflict resolution, we all know every community has a polarizing issue at some point in time. Can you talk about your experience? Give us an example of a polarizing issue, how you led the community through that, and did you get to the result that you were looking for? What was that result that you got?
I mean, one of the biggest things that we went through as a polarizing issue was COVID, and COVID was, something that hit cities and towns pretty much all the same, but, was addressed in different ways. I think that during COVID, we did a lot of things, and it was polarizing with whether you supported using masks or whether you supported vaccinations. There were things that we did and things that I'm proud of what we did. We worked to provide our residents and our employees with a safe environment. And I think the employees really appreciated that the steps that we took in the city as far as, we had weekly testing, we provided vaccine clinics, we had, the cleanings, we did the separation. So it was a very polarizing issue, and again, some people didn't. Some people didn't believe in the vaccine, they didn't believe in the mask, but we had to hit a common ground, and what we did through that period, I think I'm very proud of what Woburn did and how we handled it, how our employees handled it, and how our residents handled it. But it was the most polarizing. But again, it was one of those times that strong leadership and strong commitment from our employees helped us get through it.
Can you explain to us how you envision your relationship would be in this position with the select board? Obviously, it's one of the most critical elements of the position is that interaction with the select board. Can you explain to us communications with select board? Just go into a little bit of how do you define that kind of relationship?
Well, it's imperative that you have a strong working relationship with each selectman. And again, as I said, my goal would be to meet with you individually, find out what your goals are, find out what's important to you, and what type of communication that you want to have. But I think that's really the most important thing. And then after you meet individually, you meet with them as a board to find out, again, the overall goals of the board. And then to that end, have regular communication. As I said, the last thing a board member or the board collectively wants to do is be caught off guard or caught with an issue that they weren't aware of. That's the same thing. You don't want to be the last one to know. You want to be the first one to know.
So to take that a little further, how would you proceed if your opinion on a specific topic differed from that of the Board of Selectmen?
Oh, my job is to advise on my experience and how I think things should be done. But at the end of the day, if I'm telling you this is how I think it should be done, and the board doesn't, the board ultimately makes that decision. It's their decision. But again, my role is to strongly advocate for something that I believe in, or that I think is the best route to take. At the end of the day, if the board disagrees, it's the board's decision. And that's something that is not, that's something we talk about individually, and we talk about, as a group. It's my decision, my advice, but ultimately it's your decision as the elected official of the city, town.
So this last question that I have is really a two-part question. The first part is, what do you see you would accomplish in this role during your first 90 days on the job? And then the second part of it is, what would you say your accomplishments, what do you hope your accomplishments would be a year out? So the first 90 days, what would you do, and what do you hope to achieve in the first year?
Well, the first 90 days, I would really get into, establish a strong working relationship with the board, and then also establish a very strong relationship with each department head within the town. Have an open flow of dialogue, let them know that they can always talk to me about what's happening, what their concerns are. I think it's imperative during the first 90 days that you get up to speed on that. Also, I've had a good opportunity to look at some of the projects. I'd like to dig into the town hall, with the new town hall school facility. I've been up a couple times at the senior center. Looks like it's coming along really well. That's something that I'd like to get right in with the building committee on. And then the school, the new school, that's something that I take a real strong interest in with the building committee and seeing how that's gonna work and what the, there's been a lot of community input about what they'd like to see and the next step would be how do we finance that and how do we make that go forward? So I think those are things in the first 90 days I'd like to do.
And then, at the end of 1 year, if you were to sit here today, what would you say, or what do you hope to say your accomplishments have been?
Well, again, in meeting with the board, I'd like to find out from them what they would expect from me. Where do they want, what do they expect me to accomplish? And I think that's part of it, Julie, that I, want to get a lot of input from the board about what they expect from me. But again, there are so many exciting things happening in the town that, progress on these 3 new projects, it really would be something that I'd like to see if taken a big step forward.
Great, thank you. John?
Mr. Chair, questions from the board?
Questions? Frank,
Jim?
go ahead.
Hi, good evening, and congratulations on being one of the 4 finalists for the position.
Thank you.
2 questions for you. One, basically, right out the gate, you're going to be looking to fill both the assistant town manager role, and also we're looking at a director of finance. And I'm wondering more specifically, I know you said that you would ask the board what we would like in those roles, what qualifications. But my question to you is that what are you looking for? Are you looking for the type of person that, can take over if you're on vacation or sick, or you're looking just somebody that'll, kind of be more of a placeholder and, wait till I get back and not to make decisions? I'm just kind of curious basically what qualifications, experience, maybe education level, what are you looking for in both of those positions?
Yeah, I think, starting with the finance director, it's really important that you have somebody with a strong background, obviously, in accounting, in budget, budget preparation. I think that's that's the most important position, I think. The assistant, you want a strong assistant who can help again, really to be, a second voice for me to help out on issues that again, that we're stretched with in the town. I think the assistant right now does the human resources, which is different from what I thought, but that's an important,
Not no more.
no.
That's potentially changing, so talk about the assistant manager in the big picture versus as an HR
Yes.
director.
Well, so the assistant in the big picture, again, is somebody who has to be really strong with numbers, has to be strong with budgeting, and maybe social media, but from my perspective, I want an assistant really who's, really strong in the areas of budgeting and finance.
Okay, thank you. And my other question is that, as you know, one of the hot button issues in the state right now is the MBTA community zoning, Section 3A, I believe it's called. And I'm just kind of curious, what is your take on that as far as, what do you think personally? And also, what do you think, well, I shouldn't say personally, but in relationship to the town manager role? And also, what happens if it fails? I mean, if we go to town meeting on May 4th, it fails, and then we, potentially look for possibly another meeting or whatever. But I'm just curious, what are your thoughts as far as the
Yeah.
future of that? Both it passes and it fails for the town.
Well, to start with this, I'd say there's a majority of people who don't like the bill. They don't like the bill they don't like to have things jammed down their throat. And I think from my perspective, when I was mayor of the city of Woburn, what we didn't like is that we already were, we were committed to a number of things. We had a housing production plan where we put ourselves in a position of creating more housing to get us over that 10% threshold so we could really control our own destiny and not be threatened by developers who said, we're going to come in and put this new 600-unit apartment wherever we want to. And, we took a lot of time, a lot of pride in actually created more housing. So we felt that, and I think Wilmington may be similar, we felt that we had created housing and we weren't getting credit for any of it. But, I know a lot of people don't like it, but the real issue is that the law and the governor controlling this, and if you don't play along with it, you know, there are a lot of grants that you won't be eligible for, and that's the real problem. So I think, you know, you raise a great point, is that the job really of the town manager is to say, look, we don't like it any more than you, but this is something that if you don't do, the consequences are gonna be far worse than if you do it. That's my position.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Anyone else have comments or questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I
Slagle?
thank you, Julie and John. Said it again last night, but it's worth repeating. Thank you to your firm and to the talented folks on the screening committee that presented us with these 4 finalists. And congratulations to you, Mr. Galvin.
Thank you.
Thank you for your interest in our town. I want to see if you can elaborate a little bit on the communications piece. I think that you would learn very quickly. We have a lot of talented employees here in the town, and one of the departments that I'd like to highlight is our IT department. They do a fantastic job in supporting the town with technology, but they've also kind of been semi-charged with marketing and social media and everything else on top of all their day-to-day activities. So, you know, in your estimation, what could we do better in terms of, you know, what ideas do you have in terms of communication, right? We, as I'm sure you did as mayor, go to the grocery store, go to get a cup of coffee, and you bump into somebody who says, I had no idea that was happening. Well, you know, when did that happen? What's up with this? And oftentimes it's tough to say, you know, geez, you know, here's what we did to try to get that word out. And it's a challenge for all communities, but I think going forward, 2024 and beyond, you know, whether it's a use of technology, I didn't know if you had any thoughts on a strategy moving forward, better and increase participation in the community and to get important information out.
Yeah, it's a great question, and you know, with the IT, not to digress, but I think that one of the biggest things that IT's been, and I'm sure in your town and my city, was one of the biggest things that they've been working on is the cybersecurity with that, and that's front and center with them. So I know what you're saying, that they are stretched on what they need to do, and communication certainly is important from any city or town. You don't want to, like, you know, and we find, though, sometimes you can put out all the information that you want, and sometimes people are, you know, they're busy, you know, whether it's bringing their kids to a hockey game or a basketball game or whatever, and they don't see, you know, the important issues that you struggle with on a daily basis. They don't see it, and they don't see the work you do. So, you know, they have their families to go to, and they miss that stuff. So, yeah, it's an important way to get it, and I think that, you know, there are avenues, whether it's, you know, different social media, platforms to put it on. You have a great website, which, you know, you can always direct, you know, you direct the residents to. But those are, you know, those are now the traditional ways. It used to be the newspaper, but now these social media venues are becoming the traditional way. And I think you do need somebody from the town side who's really sitting on that and pushing out the information.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Galvin, for being here. My question is just, you're coming from a city, you know, upwards of, you know, 40,000 plus people, and we're, you know, about 25,000. Obviously, different forms of government. How do you think you would, you know, segue, for lack of a better word, from running a city to managing a town?
Well, I do think that, you know, there are parallels to the town form of government, the city form of government. The mayor, in my city, the mayor is a strong charter, so the mayor really runs the day-to-day activities, all the day-to-day activities of the city. And just like I think the town manager's position is the same way. So there, the parallels are very similar. I don't think there'd be an issue at all with transition. And from budgeting, we went over that a little bit, where I do think, you know, again, the end result is really the same, that the town manager is responsible for preparing the budget, bringing it to the finance committee, which is similar to the city council, and then ultimately to town meeting, which is the public hearing. So I think it would be you know, I feel, you know, it would be seamless. But again, there could be some bumps, but I do feel that, you know, the experience that I have, you know, I have over the past 14 years would translate very well to the town form of government.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being here. Congratulations on
Thank
being a finalist. You mentioned that your city's a AAA bond rating, and that's great. We're just not there quite yet. You also mentioned earlier about OPEB and Retirement Stabilization Fund.
Sure.
Does Woburn contribute into those two as well? And what do you see, how can you see us leaping into that AAA?
Yeah, we do an OPEB, we did 750,000 a year, and our OPEB, with investments, has gotten right around 12 million, and the importance of doing that, just like, I think yours is probably around 12 million too. The importance of that is you're getting to an unfunded liability, and maybe half a dozen years ago, it wasn't held against your financials, but now it does have an effect on your balance sheet, and the steps that you're taking, the more that you put in to bring down that unfunded liability, and the more that you have in your OPEB account, helps with your discount rate, which, again, the higher your discount rate, the lower your outstanding balance is gonna be. So I think you stress this to the ratings agency, that they're gonna look at what you're doing, and they need to know what you're doing, because it's a real positive. And I think the other thing that I would look at is you're putting $1.5 million into your retirement your retirement fund. I don't know if you're getting the bang for your buck on that. I really don't, and I think you need, I think what I would suggest is that you really have to have somebody, an actuary, come and say, hey, this is what Wilmington's doing. It's pretty impressive. They're putting $1.5 million away. How is that going to help lower your funding date? Is it going to bring it back from 2037 or 38, whatever it is, and bring it back? So what are you getting for putting? It's a significant amount of money, but you have to let the rating agency know we're doing this, and this is how it's helping. And I don't think that you've gotten to that point yet, but I think that's a really, really important thing that you're doing. I think it's important to let the rating agency knows what it's actually doing for you, because I think before you bring them in, I think that's something we could get an actuary in to say, this is what this means, and it's important.
And another question regarding economic development in zoning. How do you see that zoning helping out the economic development building in the community? And what is it, Washington Street
Yep.
Bridge? And do you think that that's going to be a key?
The new Boston Street Bridge?
Boston Street
Yeah.
Bridge. That's going to be a key.
I mean, I think that'll help. It's going to open up, definitely on Woburn's side, it's going to open up some of those older buildings. We hadn't gotten to the point that the next thing we're doing was look at the zoning to see how we could change that to spur some more economic development, because that was for Woburn. That was an area that you want your business developed, because it's away from the residents. It doesn't impact traffic as much. It's out of the way. It's a perfect area. But zoning, zoning's a tool that can help in different areas in the town of Wilmington. And it's all part of, again, planning and what areas you want, what type of development you want, and where you want it to go. One of the things that Woburn did is we became a bio-ready community, which is the Mass Biotech. They have a designation where communities could be designated bio-ready, and they ranked them platinum, gold, silver, and bronze, based on what type of zoning you had to encourage, the biotech companies to come in. It was really some by right uses. Woburn was a platinum. I think Wilmington could take advantage of that too. There are certain areas that you might want to look at that, as far as it's really a marketing strategy, but you're also changing your zoning somewhat to allow some biotech uses by right. And I think that's Wilmington has not much of a difference when you look at the assessed value, the overall assessed value of Wilmington versus Woburn. I think Wilmington's at about $7 billion. Woburn's 11. The makeup of Wilmington's maybe 25%. maybe a little lower, 22% is commercial, industrial, and personal property. Woburn's about a little bit more than that, just a little bit, but the difference is Woburn has more commercial, whereas I think Wilmington still has more industrial, which isn't a bad thing, but the values generally are more for commercial. So my point being is that you can tweak some of your commercial property, your commercial industrial to commercial by changing the zoning slightly, and maybe you'll attract different uses in those areas.
Thank you.
Questions? No?
Okay, thank you, Board. So we're done at this point, so, right on time, actually, so, but I'd like to allow Scott for a closing statement to the Board at this time.
Yeah. Again, I really want to, I appreciate the opportunity to interview for the position. It's something that, again, I'd be really excited about. I think it's a great opportunity for me. I think it's a great opportunity for the board. My experience over the last 14 years, I think would translate and help greatly in some of the projects that you do and some of the things that you're really experiencing right now. I see, you know, a lot of the things Wilmington's going through, Woburn has gone through over the past 14 years, as far as construction, as far as your budgeting, as far as you're sitting right at the cusp of a AAA bond rating. And again, I've got the experience, whether it's budgeting, collective bargaining, you know, zoning, economic development, and, you know, I'd be really excited. It's a great opportunity, and I just appreciate the opportunity that you give me tonight.
Okay, so at this point, as you know, the Board is interviewing tonight, finishing, and they'll be deliberating on Monday night. So the process will continue on Monday night, so we'll be talking to you. And again, thank you for coming in this evening.
Thanks, John.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Galvin. And at this time, we're going to
Joe,
take
for
a
the
10-minute
Ys.
break.
Yeah, what's the why?
Thank you, very nice.
I'll take the position.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Scott, I appreciate you coming in.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
end.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I'm going to introduce to you our candidate. As you know, we've had a lot of, we've had 4 applicants that were submitted by the selection committee, and they had interviewed 7 out of the 17, and Eric is one of them, and this is Eric Slagle. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you all. So Eric, I'm going to kick off and start going through some questions, and then about halfway through, we're going to change to John, so you don't get tired of hearing my voice.
Sure.
So to start off, first of all, congratulations again. You're one of 4 finalists to be brought before the board. We had 2 last night and 2 this evening, as you know. So why don't we take a few minutes to just explain to the board what's your experience, why do you want this job, why do you think you're the best fit for this position?
Sure. Thank you. I do, at the beginning, want to thank the board for having me here. Thank the selection committee for picking me as one of the finalists. So my name is Eric Slagle. I have an extensive background in municipal work. I started off back in, just out of law school. I started working for Copeland and Page. So folks who aren't familiar with that, Copeland and Page is a municipal law firm out of Boston. They represent about 1/3 of the cities and towns in Massachusetts. So I worked for them while I was in law school, and then after law school, then I decided to make a change. I moved from Copeland and Page to be in-house counsel for the city of Lowell. So I was in the city of Lowell Law Department for about 7 years. And then after I was in the legal side of the city of Lowell, I moved over to the policy side when I was hired as the Director of Development Services for Lowell. So my time in Lowell was about 17 years and encompasses the vast majority of my municipal experience. It gave me a really good insights, I think, in lots of the different parts of how a municipality functions. So from the legal side, of course, I was exposed to litigation, MCAD complaints, workers' compensation complaints. I did collective bargaining negotiation in the city of Lowell. Lowell has, I think, 15 unions, so there was a lot of collective bargaining negotiation. I served as a municipal hearing officer for terminations at the appointment of the city manager. I worked for 5 separate city managers while I worked for the city of Lowell. When I moved to the policy side, I got exposed to a whole different set of challenges, as anybody on the non-legal side knows. Development services, where I worked, was a department that was underneath the planning and development umbrella, and handled basically all sorts of land use and planning for the city. So in addition to having the building commissioner and all the building inspectors and all the health inspectors and all the plumbing, gas, and electrical inspectors that work for us, plus all the staff in the permitting side, I also had the planners who worked for me. We administered the planning board, the zoning board, the Lowell Historic Board, the Conservation Commission, as well as eventually the Community Preservation Commission in the city. That job basically linked me in with just about every other department in the city. We had to work very closely with public safety, both police and fire, with respect to not just complaints and inspections, but also ongoing projects, working closely with public safety to make sure that all of the requirements were met for development projects in the city. Worked very closely with the engineer's office and the Department of Public Works to make sure that the public-facing infrastructure for projects was seamlessly integrated with the existing public infrastructure, and I had really good relationships with them. The water and the wastewater utility, we worked really closely with them, especially on the Board of Health side, where my inspectors work closely on helping the wastewater treatment with their the inspections of vehicles. We were in charge of the city's master plan. So we did, right when I started in development services, we did a it was a Lowell Sustainable 2025 master plan. That happened as I first started there. As I left Development Services in 2022, we were working on the next master plan about 10 years after the first. So I had a lot of experience with master planning. In the interim, when I was in Lowell, I was also a bit of a fixer. And so the city manager, we had there was a bit of a crisis in the building department when I was an attorney. And so I was tasked with coming down and running the building department for a few months. There were some internal crises with that department, and so they needed someone to come in and oversee it. So I was tasked to do that. I was, when the city clerk's office had a bit of a scandal and the city clerk was let go, the city council named me as the acting city clerk. So I was the city clerk in Lowell for a few months, trying to kind of reset that department and bring it back up to expectations. In addition, I was chosen by the city manager as, for a better term, the marijuana czar. I was the person who was in charge of both drafting the medical marijuana regulations for the city and working with the companies and negotiating medical marijuana host community agreements. I was also in charge of drafting the recreational marijuana zoning for the city and working with various companies negotiating host community agreements for marijuana, both dispensaries and cultivation facilities. Overall, I probably negotiated about 15 host community agreements for the city of Lowell for marijuana. And, you know, as of the time that I left, they had brought in north of $5 million in fees to the city over my time there. In addition, the city manager put me in charge of shepherding the Community Preservation Act through its various stages to be adopted. Lowell had tried to get the Community Preservation Act adopted multiple times and failed. And so, in what was a bit of an odd situation from the way the Community Preservation Act gets adopted in most municipalities, this came as a top-down mandate. One of the city councilors decided he thought it would be a good idea that we adopt the Community Preservation Act, and the city council got on board. So there was no groundswell of grassroots people trying to lead that charge. So I was the person who was in charge of trying to generate that sort of following for the Community Preservation Act. It was successful. We did pass it on the first try under my oversight. I used a combination of social media and getting on local radio station and then the newspaper to try to reach out to various constituencies. I was on cable access a few times to talk about the Community Preservation Act, and it was a successful venture for the city. And that Community Preservation Act, I sat on the Community Preservation Committee that was created for the first couple of years that the Community Preservation Act funds were available. We awarded several $1 million in community preservation funding during that time, and I was one of the folks who was instrumental in helping choose the projects that got that funding, both public projects and private projects. At a certain point in time, I decided I wanted to try to move up in my career, and so I took a job as the town administrator for the town of Townsend. So I've been in Townsend for just about 2 years now. It's a very different situation than the situation in Lowell. Going from the fourth largest city in the Commonwealth to a town of 9,500 people is a little bit of a change. But that, along with other things that came in my career, have helped me understand that fundamentally the challenges of a municipality are the same, just different in scope. So every municipality has issues with people arguing about what they want to have in the budget. Every municipality has issues with people concerned about increasing taxes or going for overrides. And so it's been really helpful for me to be in Townsend because in a place like Lowell, where we had entire departments for human resources and for procurement. In a town like Townsend, that's basically me. So I got a lot of really good experience that enhanced what I'd already done in the city of Lowell, working day to day as kind of the chief operating officer of the town. I report to a 3-member board of selectmen. I've had excellent reviews in my time there. I'm very happy about working in Townsend. And I'm very excited about the opportunity to come to a place like Wilmington, because I think that Wilmington is the kind of town that would give me the opportunity to meld all of my various experience in a place that has the size and the resources to need a person who can lead it in a way that it can accomplish the things that the citizens and that the board want, and I believe I do have those qualities. I believe that my experience has really kind of honed me for a town of this size, a town of this complexity, and I really look forward to the opportunity to take on that sort of a role.
Thank you, Eric. So how, you talked a little bit about, you have a select board, obviously. How do you envision you would work with the select board here to understand their vision for the future of the town and to help implement that vision?
Well, I think that for any town administrator or town manager, that's really crucial, is to do some very high-level vision setting with the board, and to then translate those high-level visions into concrete implementation steps for how to move the town forward in the way that the board envisions and the way that ultimately the citizens of the town hope to move the town forward. So I'm really kind of an in-person kind of individual. So I would envision myself having regular meetings with individual members of the board to talk about kind of their thoughts about the way that the town should be going forward, and using our meetings together as informal session to kind of weave those thoughts into a coherent plan as to what everyone feels is the best next step. My role I see in that is to be the implementer. I'm the person who takes the ideas of the board, the ideas of the public, and comes up with concrete steps as to how to get the town to those places. And that would be how I would see kind of working with the board. I've always been a person who encourages feedback and communication. I think that the best way to get the best results for the town is if there are open lines of communication, not just with board members, but also with the public, so that we can kind of communicate our vision as the board and the town manager, and also hear from the town what they feel about that. And sometimes that involves an educational component on our part to explain why what we're doing is going to get the town where the folks want it to go. And sometimes that's us listening and hearing that the town feels like maybe we need to change our thought process and move in a little bit of a different direction. So those are, I think, the challenges that a town manager position has to juggle. And I that's how I would kind of manage it if and when I got the position.
So to follow up on that, of challenges, so one of my questions was, what do you foresee as the challenges of the town manager position here in Wilmington?
Well, I mean, I think that Wilmington, like every other town in the Commonwealth, is dealing with the budgetary challenges that we're all experiencing. I know there was an article in the Globe today that talked about the number of school districts around the state that are looking for overrides or are going to be in deficit in this year. So I think, across the kind of the top layer of everything that affects municipal government is where are we going to prioritize our spending, and how are we going to make the most of our efforts to reach the goals that the town wants. Importantly, I think dealing with the school district is a big part of that. one of the things I've done since I've been in Townsend is I was appointed by the Townsend Board of Selectmen and the Pepperell Board of Selectmen and the Ashby Board of Selectmen to be the town representative in the collective bargaining negotiations with the North Middlesex School District Teachers Association. So I was the voice of town government in those negotiations. So over the past year, I worked with the members of the administration and the school board. So I think that I think is a challenge that every municipality has, but I do think it's something that I have experience with. I negotiated collective bargaining agreements generally with in Lowell and Townsend, and more specifically with collective bargaining with the schools. I think that's really a critical issue. Knock on wood, we successfully negotiated a collective bargaining agreement with the school district last month, and so we avoided any kind of unpleasantness that you've seen in some of the other municipalities in the Commonwealth, and I think we got a good working relationship with that group, so they understood where the town side is coming from and where the teacher side is coming from. I think economic development is another critical piece that I think Wilmington is poised to do some really exciting things with various properties around the town. I think when you're talking about the Olin site and and dealing with the cleanup of a Superfund site like that, that can be a kind of a pivotal piece of real estate for economic development if it's done correctly. When I was in Lowell has a Superfund site, Silresum, that I was kind of a part of the working towards the resolution of that site and turning it back into productive use. So I think that's something I think in Wilmington is a challenge, but also an opportunity for the town to move forward on. And I think that if we can kind of tap into some of the new funding sources that the state is coming out with for economic development. I know that the governor just proposed earlier this month their economic development bond bill, and there's a lot of kind of exciting pieces in that bill, and some new funding for both green technologies and for life sciences R&D work. And so I think working with the board to see if that's an appropriate thing that we should do in Wilmington to try to kind of accelerate economic development by trying to tap into some of those resources. I think that the town is kind of prime location for that sort of economic development, as long as it meets the kind of the goals of the board, and we're doing it in a way that's thoughtful towards the town and not kind of not letting it run rampant, but doing it in a way that's productive and moves the town's goals forward. So those, I think, are some of the challenges and I'm sure there are lots more that we'd have to work out as a board to try to figure out where we're going to steer the town in the next 5 or 10 years.
So the board is in consensus that this type of position, and particularly here, really strong leadership skills are required for the position. What skills and approach do you have with regard to leadership?
So I would, so not to lapse into sports talk, I would characterize my leadership skill as kind of a player's coach. I think that the best way to do the best for the town is to hire the best people, and to promote the development of staff in such a way that you are creating a culture of professional development in the town. I think my leadership style is collaborative and communicative. I'm most interested in kind of face-to-face collaboration with department heads. Because I've touched so many different departments over my time in municipal government, I feel like I have a really good grasp on the challenges that those departments are facing, because they're the same across the state. Every DPW director will tell you that the price of salt is going crazy, and the equipment that they have is 5 years too old, and they need to replace it. And so I think my style would be sitting down with them, explaining them the overall picture, because I don't expect a department head to necessarily understand what I think the board and the town manager has to understand about how all the cogs work together in the town. But explaining to them how that works, how we see both capital investment and general fund budgeting for their departments working together, and working along a timeline to kind of reach the goals that we as the board and the town manager come up with, but making sure that the department heads are on board with all those goals. I do very strongly believe in promotion from within where it's appropriate. I think that one of the benefits that a lot of people overlook with long-term employees is institutional knowledge. To lose that without realizing what you're losing can be a real risk. I know that Wilmington, like every town, has stories and characters and history. And so making sure that I, as an incoming town manager, learn those stories and learn that history from the staff members who kind of participated in it is a good way, in my mind, to get through some of the rough waters of learning a new municipality. And so I would encourage the staff to come and talk to me. I have an open door policy with every level of staff, everywhere I've worked. I've done a lot of hiring. I feel like I'm a good judge of talent. I've hired multiple people who went on to be assistant city managers for the city of Lowell. I've worked with a lot of really talented people, and I feel like I have a good eye for talent. And so bringing along those talented people to work in Wilmington would be something that I think is really crucial for the town. So that's how I would describe my leadership style. I do think it's important for me to be collaborative with the board and to learn what the board's goals are. And that sort of collaborative style, I think, would permeate through how I would work with everybody in town.
I want to ask just one more question on management, because you were just talking about that, and then go into finance. But related to building a team, you talked about that, and right now, obviously, there's two critical key positions that are vacant, the assistant town manager and the finance director. How would you go about building that team with those two positions?
So that's a really key issue, I think, for Wilmington right now, is trying to figure out a way to capture both internal staff members who may be kind of underutilized now, and also bring in talent from the outside that may provide opportunities to the town that we don't have at the time being. So the first thing as a town manager I have to do is I have to get in and kind of judge the skills and qualities of the people who are already in the departments. I've often said I'd rather catch a talented person on the way up. So if there's a person who is seems like they're really talented, but they just don't have quite the experience that we're looking for, I'm the kind of person who's willing to train from within, work with that person, maybe hire a vendor to kind of help bridge the gap while we're training an internal candidate, because I think that provides a really good resource for the town, because you're maintaining internal staff, but it also provides an incentive for the staff that are already here, because they know that if they show that they are willing and able to excel in their positions, there's the opportunity for them to move up. And so I think because those two positions are really key positions in the town right now, the first thing you have to do is evaluate what's here internally and see if there's any opportunity for folks around. But otherwise, cast a wide net, and I really want to bring in the most talented people that I can find in the Commonwealth to do those roles, because I think the town is better served if you have really talented people in those positions.
Thank you. What's your overall fiscal philosophy, and what types of financial strategies have you put into place to ensure that the organization is sustainable and that you can accomplish what you need to accomplish for the town within within the financial resources you have?
Sure. So, before I went to law school, I was actually in banking. I often make a joke that when I went to law school, I was one of the few people who actually took a step up on the how many people hate you ladder from banker to lawyer. So I have a background in finance. I worked for Bay Bank, and then Bank Boston, and then Fleet. So I worked in banking for several years. So I have a background in general finance, but I've also done budgeting for many years. I did the budgets for the Department of Planning and Development for 7 years in Lowell. My fiscal style is conservative. I think it's important to maximize our stabilization and rainy day funds so that in the event that we have a kind of another downturn in the economy that we suffered in the mid 2000s, or like the bubble that happened, at COVID, so the town can be able to respond in a thoughtful manner to those emergencies and not react at the spur of the moment. I'm a believer in data-driven management, and so I think the most effective way to communicate our success and goals to folks is by doing our best to try to quantify what the departments provide to the town. And then that's our justification for their funding. These are the kind of the metrics by which we're measuring their success. I think that I think it's important to maintain a thoughtful, long-term capital plan. I think that having a 5 or in some cases even a 10-year plan for equipment, especially high cost equipment like fire apparatus or the larger DPW vehicles, is critical in being able to make sure that we are providing the highest level of service we can to the town without needing to make emergency purchases that are going to create a temporary blip in our financial picture. I also do think it is important to maintain those sorts of investments in infrastructure. I think one of the things that a lot of municipalities struggle with is kind of preventative maintenance. Too many pieces of infrastructure across the Commonwealth suffer from lack of maintenance. So I think that it's better to pay, a smaller amount over time to maintain equipment, buildings, and vehicles, than to ignore that and have to replace them in a kind of a more rapid time frame. So I think, between those things, I think it's important for me to also get a view from the board as to how they feel like it's how you feel is the critical way that we're going to invest the town's, hard-earned tax dollars. I think that, if we have the opportunity to target specific layers of infrastructure on an appropriate, timely basis, it will allow us to kind of spread the pain over multiple years without having a real shot in the arm in one year. And so I think that's it's critical that we have a really good chief financial officer, and so that position is critical in maintaining, our day-to-day cash and account flow, but also for those long-term planning projects that I think it's crucial that we are, looking, down the road to make sure that we're being fiscally appropriate for the town.
So just briefly, the last question on financial, and then I just want to get a little bit into personnel management. Do you have experience, and what is your experience with financial forecasting and either developing or revising financial policies?
So my experience with financial forecasting is typically is what I've done for the town of Townsend. So we when I got to Townsend, there was a bit of a challenge. There had been a void in the town administrator's position for over a year. when I got there. The Board of Selectmen was doing their best to try to handle the running of the town. But it's a volunteer board, and they had their own job, so it was a challenge for them. So one of the things that fell by the wayside was kind of the 5-year forecasting and planning for budgetary and capital needs. So what we've done over the last couple of years is work really hard with the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen, along with myself and our town accountant to revive some dusty old financial policies that the town had, make sure that they were up to date and accurately reflected the appropriate fiscal situation of the town now, but also to start doing financial forecasting on a 5-year basis for both the general fund budget, the capital budget, the water enterprise, to make sure that we were, as best as we could, trying to avoid any unfortunate spikes in expenses. The other challenges that I think every municipality has is some towns, and Townsend was one of them, that relied on ARPA funds to fund some salary positions, which is probably not the best choice for one-time funds. But that's, they did what they had to do in the time frame. And so one of our challenges in Townsend was to try to smooth out the cliffs from the loss of ARPA funds over the next few years so that there wasn't going to be a massive bill due from the general fund budget when those ARPA-funded salaried positions are all of a sudden no longer ARPA-funded. So that was one of the challenges that we've been working with, and I think we've done a kind of a good job of setting in motion a plan to deal with those increases over time, and so we're not going to be relying on a massive jump in general fund revenues to fund those positions.
So I just have one question related to personnel management, because you touched on some of the other questions I was going to ask, so I won't have you repeat. But in human resources today, what are some of the key issues and needs that you would like to see addressed if you were to take this position?
Well, so I think that we are not in the human resources situation that we might have been 25 years ago. The realities of 2024 are that human resources is a much more critical department than it was when I started in municipal government. And so I think it's really kind of critical that we identify any kind of areas of deficiency in human resources as soon as possible. I know that the federal guidelines for things like FMLA are changing all the time, and making sure that our HR policies reflect the accurate FMLA guidelines are really critical. One of the things that happened in Townsend recently was some challenges with HR policies with relation to spouses going on to Medicare, and whether or not, if your spouse retires and went on Medicare, is that something that we would allow them to drop and come back onto town insurance. It's not something that I think folks contemplated a lot before now, but because we have kind of across the Commonwealth, we've got a bit of an aging population, and so and people are kind of working into their retirement years now because of fiscal realities. The interplay between town insurance and Medicare is something I think has become more and more relevant. I also think that lots of municipalities have challenges with their kind of their personnel policies and making sure that they have been brought up into the 21st century. So I think checking with a new assistant city manager, HR director, or even talking to a vendor about making sure that they're reviewing our HR policies and making sure that they're up to modern standards. I think municipal policies sometimes are like, the wheel that doesn't squeak. And so it's easy to ignore them if they're not causing a problem right now. I think in HR policies, you run into the risk of that blowing up a lot more than some other policies that you have. And so taking a proactive look at human resources policies and make sure that there's not a landmine in there that's going to come back and cost the town money because we just weren't paying attention is something that's really critical. And I think, we that's why that role is really crucial to have filled. And I think getting a talented person who has worked in the field and is knowledgeable about municipal HR is going to be a real asset for the town, but also a real challenge.
Thank you. John.
Great. At this point, we're running a little tight on time, so we're going to go through a few more areas, though. So economic development, you were Director of Development Services, for 10 years in Lowell. So coming to Wilmington, two areas. One is what may be type of strategies you can, bring to the table as to economic development, for the town and what you see here. But also there's the issue of Superfund site, and bringing resources and, bringing a strategy to handling that for the future. Discuss that, please.
Sure. So I worked on a lot of fairly large economic development in Lowell. I was critical in both in my legal role and in my Director of Development Services role with working on the Hamilton Canal District. That's a 15-acre parcel that the town took by eminent domain back in the early 2000s. And parceled out various separate development parcels to developers for the construction of both residential and commercial buildings on that 15-acre site. So I worked through the legal takings part. I was part of the litigation when those takings were being challenged in court. And then when I was the Director of Development Services, I worked really closely with the proposed developers on both compliance with what at that time was a form-based code, which it's a particular kind of zoning code that operated in that development sphere in the Hamilton Canal District, but also working with them on kind of the appropriateness of the development that they were bringing in. In addition, I worked really closely with the Economic Development Director on potential reuse of the Silresum site. We did some very proactive reaching out to UMass Lowell, worked really closely with their business development department and with their entrepreneur system to try and bring incubator space to the Hamilton Canal District in the hopes that what we would spur would be businesses, you have 15 incubator businesses, so 5 of them are successful, so they move to larger space. You reuse that space for 15 more incubator businesses, and the idea would be that you're growing kind of a homegrown kind of economic development cycle through a space like that. So I think if I came to Wilmington, what I would do would be looking at some public partners, seeing if we can partner with some of the institutions of higher learning in Massachusetts to provide space for their kind of entrepreneurship program. I think being really proactive with high-level developers about the Superfund site as a long-term goal. I think one of the things that I learned when I was in Lowell was to not settle for a short-term gain if the long-term goal can get you something bigger. So you don't want to jump at the first, large warehouse just because somebody's proposing it. I think you need to have a vision for what you are looking for, not just on that site, but in that area as a whole. And come up with strategies to engage developers who work in that sphere. So if we're talking about life sciences or we're talking about green technologies, we need to reach out to the developers who kind of cater to those businesses and figure out what they need from us as the town, as infrastructure, as incentives. What does the state have to offer us in those arenas? Can we match those with, say, MassWorks grants to do infrastructure work in town to make these sites more enticing to the high level, the big fish, as opposed to several little small fish? Because I'd rather wait an extra few years to get something on the hook that's going to be a long-term win for the town of Wilmington and the region and the area around it than just sign up for the first thing that comes along. So I think that those would be kind of my economic development strategies. I worked with a lot of really talented people in Lowell who did this, and I feel like I learned a lot about the best ways to do it. It's also important to have a really good team with you. So I'd really want to make sure that we had a robust economic development team who were pursuing these strategies as well.
So coming into Wilmington, how do you become part of the community? That's a huge part in the town manager role. And how do you, on the other side, how do you communicate with the community? How do you set up systems to get messages out, to the community and work that way?
So again, this is another answer that's very different than it was 25 years ago, because the kind of the loss of local papers and the loss of local radio stations means that our channels for communication have narrowed in that scope, but also we've got social media that sometimes is unregulated. It's like the Wild West. And so trying to get a handle on having talented people who can tap into those sorts of methods of communication, having a robust but very neutral and not controversial Facebook presence. So the idea is not for us to generate content that people are going to be yelling about, but to be able to effectively communicate the town's message so that people can participate in the ways that we seem appropriate, to make sure that we get quorums for town meetings, to make sure that we are sharing kind of the vision of the board. So I think that sort of kind of level of communication is really critical. As the town manager, I think it's also really critical that I'm out there in the community myself. When I was in Lowell, I did this a lot, but when I'm in Townsend, I have office hours at the library and the senior center. So folks who are just dropping into the library or senior center can stop by and chat with the town administrator. I participated in the Memorial Day Parade. During the summer there are band concerts at the Common in town, and so making yourself present at those locations, so that the people who don't feel comfortable coming down and talking to you at town hall might feel comfortable coming and talking to you when you're in shorts and a polo shirt on the Common, and it's not such a stressful situation. I'm not going to volunteer the board for this now, but one of the things I did in Townsend was I had the Board of Selectmen do for charity, they did a grill. They went out on Town Common for one of the band concerts and grilled hamburgers and hot dogs for the public. I got a lot of ribbing for it because they thought that was an interesting thing, but it was a way for us to all participate in getting out to the community and making sure that we can be a face that they recognize and feel comfortable talking to. 3 weeks ago, I told you I'd go out and play basketball, in a local league. That may be a few months off, given my Achilles. But I think participating in kind of, when I was in Lowell, I would play basketball at the Boys and Girls Club. Once a week, and I play volleyball, at one of the local parks. There had a lot of volleyball courts, and so I think getting yourself out into the community like that is a really good way to engage with people who don't normally engage with local government. And even if all that is that they know who I am, that may mean that if they have a question or they have a concern, they're going to feel more like they can call me instead of just reading some random post on Facebook and getting their information from there. Because I think that's the dangerous part, is that we have to effectively communicate our message, and there's a cacophony of things coming at them from social media that aren't necessarily true or accurate. And so getting a way to kind of directly communicate with the folks in the community is really, really critical.
Okay. As long as you take the blood out of the sport of basketball when you get out there.
Well, yeah.
So moving to the board, what's a successful relationship look like between you and a select board?
So I think a successful relationship between you and the board is the comfort level between the board members and myself, that any board member feels like they can call me up and have a conversation about something that's going on in town that was brought to their attention, and trust that once they give me that information, I'm going to appropriately handle it and staff it out if that's necessary, or deal with it myself, so that you see me as kind of a resource for you to kind of affect the day-to-day things that come to your inbox. So it's not glamorous, but constituent services is one of the big things that we do in municipal government. People can be a lot more concerned about the pothole in front of their house than about spending $1 million on a fire truck. If that pothole isn't fixed, it doesn't matter what else is going on in town, because they're concerned about that pothole. And so if they have reached the point where they're calling a member of the board about it, you guys need to know that when you let me know that I'm going to take care of it, so that your constituent services are taken care of, and you trust that I'm the kind of manager who's going to make sure that I'm doing it in the appropriate fashion, in a legal way, and making sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, and affecting the change that you guys are hoping to see. It's also, in my mind, the ability for us to have disagreements. In a board of 5 members, and the 6th being a town manager, there's going to be times when we're not all, on the same page. It's important that we maintain that level of communication. And I think if I'm a successful town manager, even if we disagree about something, you're still going to feel like you can talk to me about it, and we can have a conversation, and we can, and that I am hearing your concerns and kind of appropriately responding to your concerns, even if it's not the answer that you wanted at the beginning of the conversation. I know that the larger the board gets, the more challenging it gets. So I'm working with a 3-member board, but when I left, the city of Lowell had 11 city councilors. So I had 11 people who would call me directly as the director of development services and want to have answers. So, I'm comfortable working in that sphere. Like I'm not at all intimidated by the fact that I would have 5 bosses. I had 11 bosses, and that was a lot. So, I think that it is, if I'm doing my job right, then you all have a personal relationship with me, that you feel like you can communicate with me, and that I'm going to address your concerns and respect your concerns, and that we're going to make sure that the board can function in such a way that we're all, at the end of the day, rowing in the same direction for the town.
But what if on a policy decision, you're not in agreement with the board? The board's, leaning one way in a policy direction, and you're just not agreeing with that. What happens?
Well, that all depends. So I have a fairly substantial legal background. If the reason why I'm leaning one way is because I'm concerned about the legality of something, what I'm likely to do is say, this is code for I'm not comfortable with this, maybe we should run that by town council. I think that I'm always willing to, discuss kind of policy moves. I think before a policy decision is made, my job is to provide you with every piece of information that I have, and every kind of bit of advice, experience that I've had over my years to help the board make what I think is the right decision. And once the board says, we are taking this fork, my job is to make sure that we do it in an ethically, responsible, legally appropriate, and effective way, so that we're maintaining services for the town. That I can't. I would never promise that I will agree with you no matter what you say about policy. I think that would, anybody who said that would be lying to you. But I can say that, my role is to advise the board on policy decisions like that, and make sure that we all understand the ramifications of either decision that the board makes. And then once the board makes a policy decision, for me to communicate it effectively to staff, communicate it effectively to the public, make sure that everybody understands the reasons why we as a group have come up with this policy decision, and I will, work to make sure that we do it in the best way possible.
For your first 90 days on a job, what does that look like if you're appointed to the position?
One thing that so I worked in Lowell for almost 17 years. And the one thing that I underestimated when I went to Townsend was how much knowledge I had that I lost. How much knowledge of the characters in town, the challenges, the history, the properties that have been a problem, and that property when my dad was here was this and it was a problem, and now it's this and it's still a problem. And I was at a point in Lowell where I knew all that. I could tell you where, that one's been a problem for a while. Even before I was here, that was a problem, but we've been working on that for years. That vacant lot has always been a dumping ground, and we still haven't managed to figure out why it's a problem. We haven't managed to get it straightened out. So I think my first 90 days would be me trying to be like a sponge and absorbing every piece of information about Wilmington that I could. Trying to make sure that those two critical positions have high quality candidates in those roles and learning those roles as soon as possible. I think, we are, just because of timing, there's obviously going to be an entire year cycle of a budget that the new town manager didn't really participate in the creation of. In some ways, that's a challenge for a new town manager because you're working on, with all due respect, somebody else's budget. But that provides an opportunity to learn how that budget works. And so my goal would be to be at the end of that 90 days as fluent with that budget as if I created it myself, so that I understand the reasons why this line item went up by 15% over last year, and the reasons why this line item dropped by 5%, and the pitfalls that the town is looking at next year. Do we have collective bargaining agreements that we're gonna have to renegotiate in the next year? And are those collective bargaining agreements gonna trigger some financial implications that we know is gonna happen in this line, but it doesn't show up in this fiscal year? So I think in those 90 days, those would be my goals. And to encapsulate, make sure we're staffing those positions, make sure I learn everything I can about the town, and make sure that I understand the financial situation as well as I can.
Okay. And briefly, after your first year, what do you hope to accomplish in the big picture?
So I think that after my first year, what I'd like to come into this board and be able to say is, we've all worked together. We understand where we want the town to be in 5 years or 10 years. And here is the beginnings of our plan to get there. Some parts of that plan are going to move faster. Some of those things we may have much more concrete implementation steps in a year. Some portions of that plan, if we're talking about a Superfund site, the Olin site, that's not going to be solved in 6 months. That's going to be a much longer term goal. And so when we sit down in a year, we should have advanced that ball so that we know what our next step is for the year after that. I'd like to have a kind of a consistent economic strategy for tapping into the resources that I think the state is rolling out for economic development in a way that the board and the town has embraced. I think at the end of that year, I'd like to have a story to tell about where we're taking the town as a board and an administration. It's a challenge to get that far in a year, but I think it's something that's definitely possible, to bring the town to the point where we've effectively communicated our vision, our long-term vision for where we want the town to be, and are starting to work with the community to build the steps for how to get there.
Mr. Chair, turn it over to the board for your questions.
Very good. Questions?
Mr. Chairman? Good evening. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you on being one of our 4 finalists. So I appreciate the, your time and certainly good discussion here. Two questions that I have is that, one, is that coming out of the gate, two of the positions that are needed to be filled are going to be the assistant town manager as well as the finance director. And I'm wondering what specific education requirements or experience, what are you looking for in those two roles? And also with the assistant town manager, are you looking more for somebody to kind of cover you when you're not around and act as the town manager? Or is it more of a, hey, I'm going to be gone for a week, just kind of, keep the lights on until I get back type?
So I'll answer the second part of that first. No, I would not be looking for someone who's just going to cover for me when I'm not around. What I would be looking for is a partner, a person who would have complementary skills to mine, specifically in the areas of HR, but also who's got the kind of background that's enough different from mine so that we are able to bring different levels of skill to the administration as a whole. I see the town manager and assistant town manager positions in a town like Wilmington as, again, being really collaborative, kind of teamwork oriented. And so I think I would be looking for someone who's got kind of a long-term experience in municipal government. If they, I would hope that they would have worked with collective bargaining agreements and have some HR experience. Although I think that it's more critical that we get a person who's talented and who kind of fits the culture of working well with me than a person who checks particular boxes on a resume. That being said, I think that you're talking about hopefully someone with a master's in public policy. If they've worked in a mid or large town or a city before, that would be ideal because that would allow them to appreciate the scope of a town like Wilmington. For the CFO, it's a kind of a similar answer, which is I want someone who's been in the finance team for a municipality for at least 5 or 7 years. I've been trying to hire an accountant in Townsend since I got there. They were trying to hire an accountant for a year before I got there. Those jobs in municipal government are a struggle right now. To find talented candidates and retain them is really a challenge. What I'm doing in Townsend is I'm basically building a town accountant. We hired someone as an assistant town accountant and hired a vendor to be the town accountant for the town while this assistant town accountant over the 3 years is taking the classes and working her way into being a certified town accountant. I think in Wilmington, we have the resources that we can find a talented individual and wouldn't necessarily have to go that route. But I think you also have to be creative. And it's important that we get talented people in to start working on the problems, more important than making sure we're checking all the boxes on a resume.
Thank you. And my second question is, one of the hot buttons, as you know, statewide, is the MBTA commuter zoning. I think it's commonly known as Section 3A. And I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on both, the effects of that within the town? Is it something that you support that the town support at town meeting? And the thing is that what happens if the town doesn't support it at town meeting? We got the annual town meeting coming up May 4th. So what's our plan B, and where do we go from there?
So that's a really excellent question. It's touching so many different municipalities, including, believe it or not, Townsend. Townsend's actually an adjacent community, and so we have to roll out compliant zoning for the MBTA communities zoning. So when I was in Lowell, before I left, I was the person who was spearheading the MBTA zoning compliance. Lowell is actually one of the municipalities that has gotten their plan already approved by the state, and so that was something that I set in motion before I left. And they kind of wrapped up and got that passed through the city council. several months ago. In Townsend, we're on the same sort of path, which is we're working with our regional planning commission to make sure that we have compliant zoning. I think I am of two minds about the MBTA zoning act. I do understand that there's a housing crisis in Massachusetts. I do think that we need to make sure that we're spurring more housing. I do not. I'm not thrilled with the fits all nature of some of the MBTA zoning requirements. That being said, it is the law. And if I was the town manager, my advice to the board and to town meeting would be, we need to comply with the law. And so how can we do that in a way that's the most thoughtful towards Wilmington's traditional neighborhoods and zoning? Are there areas that are kind of underdeveloped and underserved that would be ripe for this sort of kind of dense housing redevelopment? If there are, and the town agrees, that's great. If there aren't, what sort of opportunities do we have to either pick areas that already have this level of zoning and just make it legal, or kind of work with a professional consultant to say, this is the minimum you need to do, and here's how we're going to do it in the least obtrusive way. There's a lot of education that has to be done about this. I think it's important for everybody to note that this is not a requirement that anybody build units. It's only a requirement that we zone it, so it's theoretically possible. So I think the first thing I would need to do is sit down with the board, figure out what steps have already been taken towards bringing this into compliance, work really closely with the planning department. My background when I worked at Copeland and Page was land use law, so I'm still a member of the bar. I've been a land use attorney for 20 years. So working on crafting that zoning is something I am personally comfortable with doing myself, but I'm also, really excited about collaborating with folks on working that sort of problem and coming up with a solution that fits. If for some reason the town said no, we already know what the state's going to do because they did it to Milton. When the Attorney General filed suit against Milton, I think it was kind of the Rubicon. She crossed it, and so we know what's going to happen the next town that says no and goes past their deadline, still saying no. I would encourage the town to not be next on that list and figure out a way to comply with the zoning in a way that's most thoughtful for the town.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
I have a question. Again, this is from a resident. I've asked all the candidates. Olin Chemical Superfund site in Wilmington is the most important environmental issue that we have in town at this time, with on- and off-site contaminations polluting our groundwater and our water supply. With the potential of redeveloping this property, what is your experience with dealing with a Superfund site like this that is getting ready to look at developing?
Sure. So like I said, the Silresum site in Lowell is probably 5 years ahead of where Olin is right now. And so one of the key pieces of economic development that we did for that site was to start proactively reaching out to high-end life science developers as to what would be the best sort of infrastructure that we as the city at that time, but in town, what can we do to make this site more attractive for you to come in and do some sort of development? What sort of infrastructure do we need to support the highest and best use of that site? Having a Superfund site in town is obviously a tragedy, and there's no kind of downplaying the negative environmental impacts of those sites. There is a silver lining. That silver lining is if and when it's clean, you have a very large site that's ripe for redevelopment. And so having charrettes with the town to talk about what they'd like to see at that site, working with again the high-end life sciences or green technologies developers, if that's the way the town wants to go, to talk about what would be the best way to market a site like that for that sort of development? What's the best infrastructure we can put in? I think even if eventually the town says we don't want to do that anyway, we have to do our due diligence with those sorts of redevelopment potential. When I was in Lowell, we worked with a company called King Street, which is a big R&D life sciences kind of white space developer about the Silrasm site, and putting together plans to kind of restructure, realign some roads to make access to the Lowell connector more feasible from the site, changed around some streetlight coordination so that it would be easier for large trucks to get into the site. And we were doing this all prior to the site being declared okay to be redeveloped. This was all just our preliminary work, so that when that green light comes, you're ready to jump on it, and the site's ready to say, oh, you've already done all the work that we wanted to have beforehand. You got these MassWorks grants to do this infrastructure work. You've already put all the utilities in the streets and created streets so that we can do this sort of redevelopment.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Bendel?
Thank you, Mr. Slagle. Congratulations on being a finalist, and thanks for your interest in the town of Wilmington.
Thank you.
I think, in a very short period of time, you'd find that we have a lot of talented staff here and employees in the town of Wilmington. One of the ones I wanted to highlight was our IT department, which does a phenomenal job. They're stretched like most of the departments, but in addition to supporting the technology of all of our town's departments and facilities, they've also been kind of charged with the outreach and marketing and social media as well, which I think they do a fine job with. But we're always looking for ways that we can help better communicate messaging to residents, whether it's an initiative that we're trying to push forward, a big meeting that's coming up, or anything. And it's not uncommon that we run into folks all the time saying, I had no idea that was happening, or how, when was that taking place, or whatnot. And so I know that our IT department has some ideas about what we can do. I wondered if you could share maybe some ideas of how we could, in the coming years, how can we help better communicate and get more participation in community activity?
Yeah, so I think that the real challenge, and I saw it over my time in Lowell, one of the benefits of working for so many different city managers was each one of them had a different strategy about that sort of thing, the community outreach, the social media engagement. Some ignored it, and some had really robust responses to it. And so I always felt like the more robust your response to it was, the better results you had on the back end. And so I think that making sure that there is a position in town staff who's within their roles and responsibilities is, communication. In a town like Wilmington, you're probably not talking about a full-time position, but making sure that there's a staff member who has the sort of level of experience in constituent services, in, kind of basic level graphic design, in crafting of messages, whether that's press releases or informational memos, such that person can be kind of the spider at the center of the web, right? That's the person who's making sure that we're having consistent messaging around the town. That's the person that makes sure, as silly as it sounds, that all of the things that go out look the same. They have the same message. They're using the same language, that we're being consistent with our different levels of media to have the same consistent message over those levels of media, and making sure that we're engaging on not just the most basic levels of social media, so a Facebook page, but that we have a kind of robust Twitter presence. X. We have even putting out the town messages on Instagram. We had a challenge in Townsend last year where we had a special town meeting in the fall. The quorum in Townsend is 75 people. 2 times in a row, we didn't get 75 people out for quorum. Their answer was, I just didn't know. And that's a challenge, right? That's something you're speaking to. One of the things we did some outreach to try to figure out, well, what would be a better way for us to communicate? And what we heard was something, and I'll admit, it's not something I thought of, was I need that thing to pop up on my Instagram feed every day for a week so I know that the town meeting's coming. I never would have thought of that as an effective strategy to get participation at town meeting, but there's a certain cohort of folks in the town for whom that's how they communicate. And so kind of meeting them on their level and having a person who's comfortable enough with that sort of medium to do it in a way that's thoughtful and non-intrusive, but also, gets our message across is really critical. And so I think that, in the first 90 days, I'd like to target that person and figure out if we have a person on staff who's talented enough to handle that, or if not, maybe we need to talk about a role that, or, adding that to somebody's role or bringing on someone to help us out with that sort of work.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Congratulations on being a finalist.
Thank you.
The liability issues, there's retirement liability, but there's also OPEB liability. And the town of Wilmington is putting substantial monies, $1 million into this OPEB fund. What's your thoughts on that? It's being invested in Prim. Is Townsend looking at that? Do you think that that's a vital aspect? Or is Lowell, any thoughts on?
Sure.
on that?
Yeah. So I'll go back to my time in Lowell. They had a significant OPEB liability that they were working on paying down. It's not surprising. I mean, Lowell was the fourth largest city in the Commonwealth at the time, and their budget didn't have a lot of extra for spending on pumping up OPEB. That being said, they put together a plan to, by 2035, have their OPEB met. In Townsend, it's one of the, it embarrasses me to say this, it's one of the 3 or 4 communities in Massachusetts that doesn't offer retiree benefits, doesn't offer retiree health care. It's something that the board is trying to change, but as a result, they don't have that sort of OPEB liability. But I did work very closely with the chief financial officer in Lowell when we were talking about that sort of plan. And part of my background in finance, he and I sat down and had discussions about that. I think it's critical for both the maintenance of the town's bond rating, to make sure that we have a coherent plan for getting OPEB under control in a reasonable amount of time. And the times that I was in meetings back when I was in Lowell with bond counsel and their ratings agencies, it was always a question that they were really interested in making sure that the city was looking out for. And I think that the irony is, because it affects your bond rating so much, you have to do it, or else then your cost of borrowing goes up and you're going to be spending that same money that you would be spending on OPEB, spending on higher interest rates. And so at the end of the day, it's not only appropriate for the health of the town fiscally going forward to make sure those OPEB liabilities are covered, it's also doing good fiscal business to make sure that we are presenting ourselves as a town that is thoughtful about those things to the bond rating agencies who are maintaining an appropriate bond rating.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chair, just real quick. Thank you again for being here, and congratulations on being a finalist. It's been a very robust conversation. You've answered most of my questions, so I'll lob you an easy one. What makes you most excited if you were to be the next town manager of Wilmington? Like, what made you want to apply and say, I want to be the next town manager of Wilmington?
I would be incredibly excited to work in a town like Wilmington. I think is on the precipice of doing some really exciting things economically. Mm-hmm. I think that the kind of the physical geographic location of the town, the fiscal health of the town, and the kind of, from what I have researched, the willingness of the town to embrace those sorts of advancing the town in economic development is such that it would be really thrilling to be able to do some of the things that I think I saw getting started in Lowell and be able to see them through in a town like Wilmington. The resources that this town has to be able to do that, I think, are really robust. I've been very impressed by my reading about the evaluations of the staff and the talent that the town already has in hand. And so being able to work with those sorts of talented people and steer a town like Wilmington in the direction of that sort of development, I find really challenging and really thrilling. That's the reason why I applied for the job, is because that opportunity for a town in this situation doesn't come up very often, if ever, in
Right.
the municipal world. And so one of the reasons why I think you had a lot of really great candidates was because of the excitement for this sort of opportunity. The person who sits in that town manager's office next is going to be really critical in shaping the next, 50 years for the town, because I think the next 10 or 15 years are going to be the launching point for a lot of really exciting things that could move Wilmington in some really fascinating directions.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, that sounds like a pretty good closing statement, but I'll give you a couple of extra seconds for an actual closing statement to the board.
So once again, I really appreciate the opportunity to meet with you all tonight. As I mentioned, I am really excited about the opportunity to come to a town like Wilmington. I feel like Wilmington would right-size my career. Working in the places that I've worked in the past, I have a lot of variety of experience in a lot of different sized places. I think Wilmington provides a really exciting possibility for things moving forward in the town. I hope that the board would see my experience as the kind of experience you'd like to see in the town manager's office. And I look forward to, if chosen, working really closely with the board to move the town forward. And I think it's a really exciting opportunity for all of us.
Eric, we want to thank
Thank
you
you.
for your time tonight. The board this is ending, actually, the interviews as you understand. And the board will be deliberating on Monday night. So you'll be hearing from us, after that point. And with your current leg condition, why don't we do a virtual handshake, between the board and yourself, and
Yes.
not attempt something in between.
Yeah, no wires.
And quickly walk out. I know your
Yeah.
wife is waiting outside for you.
I think she's at Starbucks. I think.
So.
Once again, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you
for-
very
Nice to meet you
much.
all.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Let's go on to communications.
Okay, thanks.
There are none. Announcements?
I'm gonna-
New business. There are no important dates at this time, other than we will be reconvening on Monday to make a selection for the next town manager barring negotiations.
6 p.m.?
Good
If I
night.
may, Mr. Chair, just a couple of preliminary remarks before Monday night for the board to consider.
please.
At this point, you'll deliberate on Monday night. You'll be taking a vote at that point. Sometimes the vote's not unanimous. That's fine. But what we do ask is the vote is not unanimous, if the board can make it unanimous after that to show, some support for the incoming person. Just want to put that, on the table. And then once that's done, the vote will be to, of course, to appoint pending a successful, contract negotiation. And any further background check you wish to have done if you want that. And then I suggest the board be ready for a discussion as to negotiating of the contract. Lou has hinted to me slightly once or twice, he's ready for a transition, with.
New best friend.
Yes, I'm taking care of you, Lou, here.
His box gets closer to the door.
Yeah. So he's looking for that to occur, but if the board can be ready Monday night as well to discuss who will be the negotiating team, to move forward, that would be helpful in a decision of this nature. So I just wanted to point that out. And of course, and I know this board will, speak positive of the candidates. This is about choosing, candidates based on the positive discussions you'll have.
Of course.
Because they've all put themselves out, being here this evening and in a public setting. And I know the board will do a great job with that on Monday night. And I'll be available virtually, Monday night for other reasons, and so be available. And if you have questions in between, you have my cell phone number. I'm available. If there's any questions, or the process, please feel free to call me.
I want to thank you on behalf of the board, you and your staff. When this first came up back in July, the first question I had is, how are we going to do this? It's been a number of years since Wilmington has gone out and searched for a town manager. We selected the subcommittee. Their recommendation was to hire you, and I believe it was the best money Wilmington has spent in a long time. You made the process more comfortable for all of us and for the town. And I want to thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. It's our pleasure to do this. This has been a surprise for us coming in here as well. And we've enjoyed actually our time here in Wilmington. Of course, I knew Wilmington a little bit from being next door, but it's actually been a very positive process, I think all the way around. And hopefully you're very satisfied with your 4 candidates that were presented by the screening committee and that we assisted with the recruitment on.
Mr. Chair, if I may, can you just, what time on Monday night? Is it 6?
6 o'clock.
6, okay, thank you.
6 o'clock. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Can I just?
Oh, yes, you can,
Yes,
sir.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. John, Paradigm has been unbelievable, the both of you. I just want the residents to know that this was an extremely thorough process. They've spoke to every department head. They really did their due diligence, and it's been a pleasure dealing with both of you. But more importantly for the town, from the town's point of view, it's been extremely thorough and good and open process. So thank you, and hope to see you in Florida soon.
Well, you see me on Zoom.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor? Have a good evening. We will see you Monday night.